All right, this is the meeting for the Water District Trustees, July 21st, 2021. First, approve the minutes of the regular meeting last month. Do we have an motion?
I make a motion.
Okay, motion, second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Kevin seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Okay, accept the minutes. Financial report, Tanya.
Yes. Total revenues are holding strong at $156,000 over budget. Overall expenses are favorable, $38,000. Cash on hand at the end of June was at $1.9 million. There are going to be some CARES Act funds available to low-income residents for their water and sewer bills, and this is being administered through Maine State Housing Authority, and the qualifications are similar to that of the heating program that they offer. So we will be directing customers to that application process as soon as that becomes available. Hopefully that will bring down our past due receivables. We have billed the city for the Grace Lawn portion, and that came to just under $39,000. And we've received a draft copy of the audit. The management letter was included in the packet. And we also have a draft copy of the significant findings that we can pass around here.
That was a lot less than anticipated, right? Is that
What's
correct?
that,
The Grace Lawn?
well, the total,
Didn't we?
If you remember, the total cost was, we would pay up to a maximum of $97,500, which included all of our labor, materials,
Yes, yes.
all the contractors,
It's just the significant
labor.
findings.
All right, yeah.
But I do think overall, it is going to be,
A little bit less.
yeah. Do you know the overall number, Tanya, for that? The overall, wasn't it 100 and,
We agreed to pay half, right?
right,
Up
up to a limit of $97,500.
Right.
But I think the entire project came in a little under budget, so when it's all sorted out, it's not going to cost us quite the $97,500.
So we're not done with the bills on that. So far, it's $39K so far.
There were billing,
We billed Auburn, the city. They paid $50,000 to Gendron,
Yeah.
and the remaining portion, their remaining half was $39,000.
Okay. But there isn't any more to bill them, then?
Nope,
So
this is
that'll
it.
be-
This squares out that
Okay.
project.
Total project came out at 157, I believe. That's what the total was.
157 was the total project. So half of that should have been about 75.
Yeah, and we're invoicing them for the 39 to give us, so we're even.
Oh, I see.
so it's a little under, so it's good.
good, excellent.
Yes, absolutely.
One question on the cash on hand. I see that it's been trending down. The graph is kind of showing us everything.
Okay, yes.
Is that a trend, or is that just because of the...
Materials we're buying?
The materials, it's project season, we knew it
I'm
would go
talking
down.
about the cash on hand. Oh,
Yep.
yeah, so we're spending down
Spending,
some
yeah.
money?
Yeah.
Or we expect to see that?
We expected it to go down during
Okay.
project season, yeah, absolutely.
We're accounting for $1 million cash reserve, right? And right now we're $2 million. We're going to be down maybe 1.5 at the end of the year.
We'll be a little below that, I would assume, with bond payments. There's a lot of bond payments due in November. And we're going to be wrapping up some projects as well.
You can see that dashed line, that's 600K, that's 100 days cash on hand, on that graph.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Is that it?
We can go into a little bit more detail with the audit if you want to.
Just, I'll ask, is anybody interested in getting more info on the audit, or is everyone want to sort of read it on their own, and maybe we can ask questions next meeting?
Sure.
And there's going to be the full, when it's done, there'll be an actual copy.
Yes,
We'll have copies available to us, so this
Yep.
is just drafts.
correct.
And that's just the management letter.
Yeah,
That's,
just the
yeah, a summary, right?
So this could, if we read this in anticipation of the next meeting when it comes out, we should be,
Unless there's any changes, yeah.
yeah.
Right. Yep.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Okay.
Everybody else is?
Yeah.
Is that it, Tanya?
Yep.
Awesome, thank you. Moves us to ratifying the payment of bills,
I move we ratify the payment of bills.
and we have a second. Do we have a second? Somebody want a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion, questions? Okay, all in favor of ratifying the payment of bills? All opposed? Okay, unanimous. That brings us to open session. Would anybody like to speak? No, so we're gonna close the open session. And that moves to number 5, our activity and project report. Mr. Broadbeck.
I'll keep this pretty brief. I know we have a full agenda. Anybody have any questions on the activity report? The biggest part of our activities over the month of June was main work, so I'm going to jump right into project update unless you had a question on the activity report. I'm happy to announce that as of yesterday, we finished the Taylor Brook Bridge project, so we got a new water main around the bridge project area, and we successfully terminated the existing main that went underneath the culverts. We did have a little bit of a problem yesterday afternoon. I'm sure you saw the email from Sid. We were planning to terminate that water main, and as we exposed it, the line just blew apart. There was a coupling that was installed the last time the culverts were put in, and it wasn't installed properly, so when you took the material from around the pipe, it came apart. So we had to deal with it, so we got it shut down, and we got the cap on as quickly as we could, and both sides are capped. So now that pipe is just underneath the culverts, and when they dig out the culverts, they'll pull out that pipe. And again, it's no longer connected to us, so it won't harm us at all. So that project is done and behind us. 3rd Street, Longchamps has finished the section from basically Guild Street to the dead end. So that's all done. Everybody's tied over to the new main. That's going very well. Louise and Lucille, we finished Louise Street. The new main is in. We're going to start tying over services to that tomorrow and start working on the main for Lucille. And as you know, Grace Lawn is done. So that puts us, we're a little bit over a mile so far this summer. So again, our goal is 2 miles. I think we're on track to do that. We have more work on 3rd. We still have Lucille, and then we've got Pearl Pine School and Willow over here that we're going to be doing as soon as we're done with those 2. So again, we're on track for main replacements for the summer. Things are going well. That's all I have.
Anybody have any questions for Mike? Great. Thank you, Mike. All right, we're going to move to new business, water quality.
Yep, just again, very briefly, the water quality for June was really, really good, comparing it to any previous June. It was warm for a while, but actually it did cool off. We had quite a few cool nights, so the lake temperature remained cool. The turbidity is down. The Secchi readings are as high as we've ever really seen them, 12.5 meter range. That's at the deep hole, so you can see down about 38 feet into the water before you kind of lose focus of that Secchi. So that is about as good as it's been. There's a very low presence of any biomass in the lake. Algae is under control. Right now the lake is trending really well. And included in your packet is this year's Consumer Confidence Report. There's a copy of it here for you. That is available on our website. That's something we need to submit every year. Yes.
Okay.
Yep, so that's a copy for you to see. That's all the testing parameters that the state makes us, mandates us to track every year, and it's published and available for the public. We have copies here in the office as well, but that's been completed.
That's something anybody can get off the website?
Yep, it's on the website, yeah.
Is there some sort of keep track of what feeds the lake, the rivers and stuff that would feed the lake in these rain events and all the rain that we have and the runoff?
Keeping track in terms of
like Brook, Council Brook is one of them that feeds into the lake.
we do.
Do we see a
We
large?
take samplings for phosphorus.
Okay, we see a larger, more water because of all the rain, and do we see a larger quantity, obviously, so that there's more potential for whatever's upstream to come into the lake.
There is, if you remember some of the phosphorus studies that have been done, that's been taken into account. Like when the Blanchard Pond study was done most recently, the sampling that was done for the tributaries, when you correlate that with the volume of water that's coming
I
in,
mean, yeah.
it certainly makes a difference with.
So we can see the effects of that later on, I mean, maybe not instantly, but we have to have a lot of rain.
You could, like for instance, the Blanchard Pond one, we were getting high phosphorus readings, but there's very little inflow attributed to the lake from that pond, so it wasn't determined to be as big a issue with some of the other tributaries we have.
Okay. All right, that brings us to the executive session. We're gonna need to have a motion in accordance with MRSA 4056E to discuss response to PUC requests for information. We have a motion to go into executive session.
I make a motion that we go into executive session.
Second?
Second.
Okay, that's Andy and Bob. All in favor? Okay, opposed? Good. That's unanimous. We will be momentarily in executive session. We'll be coming back out once we're done. He loves the gavel.
Okay, you're recording.
All right, we are just out of executive session. Kevin Arell was not in the executive session. We are back in regular session. Kevin Arell has re-entered our meeting, and we are going to continue on our meeting with, we're going to start with a couple of motions based on what we've done.
So I'd like to make a motion that all interlocal agreements with 50/50 cost sharing on hard assets, we're declaring those are unreasonable. We believe those to be unreasonable.
I'll second.
They should be based on water utilization, and the second part of that is that ownership of property should be based also on utilization.
I'll second that.
Okay, so everybody is clear, Kevin Arell is abstaining is recusing himself from this vote, so. Does anyone have any discussion that they'd like to have on this?
Just that we'd like to thank staff for working diligently on this.
Yeah, definitely.
Agree with that. So no discussion, we're gonna now have a vote on this, on the motion. All in favor of the motion? We've got 4. All opposed? 2. So the motion passes 4-2.
I'd also like to make a motion that all interlocal agreements with operational expenses that are not based on usage, we are declaring those to be unreasonable.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, so we have that motion. Is there any discussion on that motion? Okay, with no discussion, we're going to vote. All in favor of the motion? That's 4. All opposed? 2. Motion passes 4-2. So,
I have your notes there. Okay. That's just the exact
Thank you,
wording of
Jim.
the motion. Yeah.
okay. Are we all set with Jim?
I think you, to stick around for the next one too?
Yeah, I was gonna ask if you
Item,
wanted
yeah,
to
I think
stay.
so.
So now we're moving on to our, the next item, which is Auburn City Council Workshop, Lake Auburn Impact Study Update, Rights and Responsibilities of the Trustees. And before we get too much into this, I would just like that, this is a lot of information, and we're talking about the bylaws for the, to me, this is an introduction. I'm not expecting, or do I expect anybody in here, if we decide that we want to, that we're taking action on necessarily on anything at this point. That's my feeling.
Okay.
So, and Sid, Jim has something prepared for this?
Yep, just to preface this, I know, Steve, you asked, it was after the June 22nd city workshop concerning the lake study that was done by the city's consultant. They came out with a press release, and following that press release, President Milks requested an overview of the trustees on the specific rules and regulations under trustee purview regarding Lake Auburn.
Rights and responsibilities, right?
Right, so there was a lot of discussion about, anticipation about what might happen as a result of that study, so there was a chance to take a step back and look at what the trustees actually do have authorization and obligation to do. So I contacted Attorney Pross to assist with that effort, and in your packet is a memo regarding that.
In addition to the bylaws that are governed in protection of the Lake Auburn, correct? That's what else?
Yes, that's another item, that's under memo regarding filtration waiver, that's a few items down.
Right, okay.
If you want to discuss that at the same time, we can. But
So, my request, and I thank you for that, Sid, and Jim, thank you for putting this together. Wanted to understand what our rights and responsibilities are. We still don't have the final results of the study. We just have a workshop that was done at City Council with some highlights that were non-binding. There's been no policy put forward. There's been nothing to address from a city standpoint to change anything or do anything different. That was simply a person's opinion that was introducing a study that has not even been released yet. So maybe this was for me to be able to, what is our responsibilities at this point? And Sid, you and I have had a conversation that since then, you know, we're supposed to be updating these bylaws, and I know we've talked about them this year, we put them off. So, I don't know, Jim, I'll hand it over to you, and maybe you can give us some highlights, or?
Yeah, sure. You know, some of this might be review for some of the trustees who were around. I'll stand over here so everybody's not reading it.
Certainly KC would be,
Yeah, absolutely.
You sure, Mike? Yep.
There's in there.
So some of this might be review for some of you, just because I did give a presentation last year sort of about the interrelationship between the LawPac and Auburn Water District. But I think what's really important for the trustees to understand is that ultimately at the end of the day, you are the ones, this body is the organization and that's charged with the legislative authority to adopt rules, laws, bylaws, which have the weight and effect of municipal ordinances governing Lake Auburn. And an important aspect of that legislative authority, which is granted by the state legislature in your charter, is that it has to be in furtherance of a specific purpose, which is to preserve the purity of the waters of Lake Auburn and to prevent the pollution of Lake Auburn. So those very small that you see in the block quote on page 1 of that memo has really generated so much that's happened in our community around the lake in so many years. Enter the Lake Auburn Watershed Protection Commission, which is essentially charged with administering the ordinances, the bylaws that are adopted by this organization, and to put teeth and to enforce what are known here as the bylaws for the protection of Lake Auburn. Though that's one of the documents that's appended to this memo. That is what Sid was just mentioning. I know that there's been some effort to try to look at making some amendments to those. Probably important to do that, to update those periodically, as was suggested. But it's important to understand that as you go through the work of updating those, your legislative grant, although broad in authority, is also restricted to the purpose, right? You could not, there's a silly example that I put in this memo, I think is a way, actually I took it out because it was silly, but I'll use it here. You know, you couldn't adopt a bylaw that says it's okay to murder people in boats in Lake Auburn, okay? Okay, you couldn't do that because the restriction on your authority is that it has to be in furtherance of this purpose, to preserve the purity. And it's also restricted, it says, no bylaws that you adopt can be in contradiction to any general laws of the state of Maine. Obviously, killing somebody, no matter where you are, would be. So I use that example just to illustrate that there are restrictions on the authority that you do have based on that grant. The Lake Auburn Watershed Protection Commission doesn't have authority to adopt new rules. Okay, new rules. They can't adopt their own set of bylaws for the protection of Lake Auburn, they can only put teeth to what this organization has adopted. They can only act in furtherance of
Let
and
me ask a
enforcing
question.
them.
Because I'm really trying to wrap my head around this, because if we're gonna move forward, we need to know what direction we go in. So the rule that talks about septic systems around the lake, that's it, that is an ordinance, right? Did this body write that ordinance and approve it?
Yeah, and if you look at.
We did? The
if
water
you-
district did?
Well, what,
Back in 1973, the water district worked in cooperation with the city to adopt that building code.
there's
But the
this,
city did it, though.
It's in
The city actually wrote
The
the
ci- so
ordinance
if
and
you-
passed it.
Yeah.
if you- there's two key sources here, okay? We've got the bylaws for the protection of Lake Auburn, which set up in 4 levels, 3 of which are the only 3 being utilized for the purpose. And then the other is the zoning ordinance for the watershed, which has become the Lake Auburn Watershed Overlay District, and the city of Auburn has adopted, word for word, what this organization adopted in 1973. I don't know the year, but that's what Sid relayed to me. So the Auburn Water District adopted the Lake Auburn Watershed zoning ordinance, and then the city said, well, we're gonna codify this too, and there's no distinction.
So we could change it. I guess that's the point, is that this body could decide to rewrite an ordinance.
Yes.
And then pass it to the city, which then would have to be approved by council before it would be,
Yes.
the overlay would change.
I mean, yes, exactly. But if there was any conflict, if the city said, no, we're not doing that, you know, that would set the stage for a conflict between who has the authority to do this, and I think it wouldn't be much of a fight. We've got a special and private law in the state of Maine that gives plenary authority over this issue to this body.
We're the ones, see, that's what I'm trying to figure out, so it isn't the Watershed Protection Commission, they're following rules that we gave them.
They're following the rules that you gave them. In the memo, and I understand if you haven't had a chance, you guys do a lot of volunteer work anyway, and this is all volunteer for you, but in the memo, there's a section that really addresses that on page 3. I talk about how the Lake Auburn Watershed Protection Commission, if you look in the second full paragraph before the block quote, the block quote is sort of their version of the protections that are outlined in the bylaws under level 2, right? The bylaws.
That's not ordinance, that's within the bylaws, so they're making a determination of what they're reading into the bylaws.
The bylaws have some very broad language, and it's quoted there right before the block quote. Subsection B, it reads, prohibition of all water-related activities except small recreational boats used without human contact with the water. Close
That's in our
quote.
bylaws.
That's what the bylaws
That's
say.
what the trustees
That's what the trustees
said
determined.
we can do in the water.
That's what the trustees said in protection level 2, which is everywhere except for the intake area of the lake. That's what they said for use.
Yeah.
So
And
then
LawPac has further interpreted
has,
beyond that.
yes, they said, well, here's a broad statement. What does that really mean for practical purposes? What does that mean for jet skiing? What does that mean for rubber rafts? So they, under their charge, under the interlocal agreement, as the enforcement and implementation arm of the organizations that make up that body, they put teeth to it and came up with this rule, which is contained in this block quote, which is much more specific.
But it is not in violation because it includes that broad description of no human contact and no personal watercraft.
Right, and now
So they
if
determined what that, they defined what that meant.
if the trustees determined, for example, that jet skiing, let's say we're 10 years down the road and there's no open air jet skis, all jet skis have a capsule that comes over you and protects you from the water.
Yeah.
Okay, and if you decided to amend the bylaws and say jet skiing's allowed, provided that,
Hold on.
they would have to go back and make amendments
Change
to this.
this. Okay,
This
so the
says
bylaw-
prohibition of all water-related activities except small recreational boats
Without human contact with the
used
water.
without human contact with the water. How does a sailboat not fall into small recreational boat?
Because you usually touch the water in a small sailboat. You crash all the time, you're flipping over. If you ever know anybody who's sailed,
So you just
spend most
asked,
of your
you
time
asked a
in
great
water
question.
than you do on the sailboat.
You asked a very logical question, and it's a question that LawPAC was put in the position of having to ask itself and then interpret what the trustees meant.
Okay.
Okay, how does this affect sailboats? How does this affect water skiing? How does this affect jet skiing? How does this affect kayaks? How does this affect?
Kayaks, I would say, would be reasonable to say nobody's gonna contact the water unless they drag your hand behind, something like that, but most of the time, you're not gonna
As long as
capsize
you have
a
a
kayak.
spray skirt.
And that's what's required in the rules,
Yeah,
right?
so they put teeth on it to say spray skirts are required, 12 feet in length or greater. because they're trying to carry out the purpose of the bylaw, which is to
Bylaws.
prevent body
So it
contact.
goes back to the bylaws
Okay.
being the real governing
Let me
document.
give, if I could give you one more example
Mhm.
that you are probably all familiar with as aspiring and former politicians. You know, you look at our federal government, right? You've got the Congress who passed a law saying there shall be a Social Security disability insurance program for those who are disabled to receive a benefit. The laws that are adopted by Congress are written by and large fairly broadly, might be 100 pages long. But it also created the Social Security Administration, which is charged, like LawPAC, with enforcing the laws that are created by Congress and adopting regulations that put teeth on the broader language that Congress uses. The same thing happens with state agencies. You might think about LawPAC as being like a federal or state agency. It can add to and put teeth to and further define and put the particulars to the broader brushstrokes that were created by this organization.
Without approval of this
Yes.
organization.
Right.
Now,
So,
if
so
they
we
were-
could then, along those lines, if we determine, this thing says if someone accidentally touches the lake, it's not a big deal, the study comes out, right? We could say, well, sailboats are okay, because, and we could pass that law saying that ordinance here is trustees saying sailboats are okay.
Well, let me address that, because I know where you're going, and this can be applied to any host of potential amendments to the bylaws that you might come up with.
Yes.
It is important that you remember what I said at the very beginning of this, which is that although you have legislative authority, it has to be in furtherance of the stated purpose in your charter, which is to protect the purity of Lake Auburn. So, if you were going to take your example and make a change, you would want to ensure that your new bylaw has all kinds of whereas provisions before it's adopted, which explain, according to this science, according to this research, according to this, none of that will cause any degradation to the purity of the water of Lake Auburn. And even then, you might have somebody who argues, well, that doesn't do anything to govern or prevent pollution or prevent, to preserve the purity of the water. I don't know. You could have that argument come from somebody, that it's not really in furtherance of you're dealing with, you're trying to become a legislator of recreational activities, which you are by default in furtherance of your legislative purpose. A better example, I think, is the the septic system design.
Can I
Yeah,
hold
yeah.
you on that for a second? Council, where we really need to move on this is Turner, Hebron, Minot, and Buckfield in respect to persons, firms, or corporations for polluting the water of Lake Auburn. So can you just walk us through, take us maybe 2 minutes, how we can take our overlay ordinance in Auburn, give it to Turner, Minot, Hebron, and Buckfield, say, adopt this, or else we have the legislative authority to do that?
Well, I
Because
think,
that's a big thing, I'm on the commission, that's
yeah.
a big thing forever, is we're getting pollutants from the developments going on in that part of the upper watershed.
I think that it's 100% in your purview to do that, and there's even a blank page in the existing bylaws under level 4 for you to do that. There is a level, it's level 4 that you're talking about, the level 4 protection zone. It's already defined on the official watershed map and also in those bylaws, but the bylaws just say to be determined in the future. So this body,
Everybody's looking at us like we want to fix swimming in Lake Auburn. Screw swimming. I mean, we haven't swam in
It's
it
nothing
in
to do with
decades.
swimming, right?
It's nothing to do with that. That
Let's
was just brought
stop
up
the
as a-
phosphorus from coming in. That's the real power of us, based on, preventing polluting the Lake Auburn.
That's good.
That's a role.
Yeah, I see.
So shove it down their throats,
Don't have to shove it down their throats. We
Or-
do it.
talk to them and see what they're doing and what they're trying to do to protect the lake.
I would agree with Casey that you need to have if you're going to move in that direction, it should be it should be a very gradual process where there is dialogue, where you're gathering information, understanding the facts and circumstances, because there's a lot to that, right? You're talking about 3 different towns, right? 4. You're talking about 4 different towns. They've all kind of got their own, what they allow and what they don't allow and where they allow it. So there's a lot of investigation that has to go into it.
Isn't there a problem there, don't call it a conflict, but they're on the board. Avcog has a seat at the board. All these people are determining what we can use Lake Auburn for, and yet they're the cause of a bunch of the
Right.
problems we have.
Law-
That's hypocritical.
In essence, you
The
could
highest
say
level.
that,
LawPAC doesn't get a vote. Okay, if you move to change your bylaws by adding something under the level 4 protection zone by way of regulations in that zone, which are the municipalities we're talking about, WAPEC can't say, we don't like that.
No, I understand that, but the political aspects of it, those towns are gonna be upset, or they're gonna, we have to be careful because we're gonna make them do something that we're being forced to do, but you don't have to do it. And you also have a seat at the table, and you can pollute the lake.
And that's why you have to be deliberate about it.
Yeah.
That's why you don't shove it down their throats. That's why you have to be deliberate about it. You have to demonstrate that there's a problem that you're addressing.
In essence, Auburn has been subsidizing the development in Turner.
Well, when you think about it, because they
They're,
couldn't.
we're not able to build in our water protection area, but Turner is.
But only in our watershed.
Yes.
Only in the watershed.
You gotta focus
Only
on
in
the
watershed.
Everything else
watershed.
in Turner is
off
Perfectly
limits.
fine,
Right.
right.
But we have farms, we have all kinds of, that are in the watershed, right? In those, in Turner and Myatt and,
All right,
there's all kinds of.
So you guys write the laws, LawPEC puts the teeth on the laws that you guys write. And your legislative charge is captured right there on the first page of this memo in the block quote.
Now, the charter, you mentioned the charter and the bylaws. So the charter, if the charter says we have to keep the lake pure, we have to define what purity means. Because that's where your problem talked about, where sailboats are allowed, but wait a minute, you're charged with protecting the purity. Well, what does purity mean? Certain levels of chemical whatever analysis, and if a study comes out that proves that we can do X without changing that purity level, then we should be allowed to do that?
I think what I would advise is instead of looking at taking away what's already there for protection, because that sort of treads on the edge of whether or not you're within your legislative authority, look at what you can do to affect positive change to protect Lake Auburn in level 4.
Yeah.
Because if you can affect positive change in the level 4 protection zone that helps the purity of the water and prevents pollution of the purity of water, that might set the stage for other types of changes that WAPEC might be in a position to go along with. That this organization might say, hey, look at how much cleaner our water is because we did this in level 4.
And just so you know, those efforts do take place. I mean, a few years ago, we had a 319 grant through the Watershed Protection Commission, and a lot of projects were done in the outlying towns with a grant that the commission got to improve water quality. A lot of culverts were changed. We were working with their town managers. With our education and outreach coordinator, there were a lot of site visits that took place in the outlying towns around, Little Wilson Pond. They were part of the Lake Smart program. So there are things that are happening even now to bring them to the table. And we've been fortunate that we do have excellent out-of-town reps on the commission who get it, who understand it. So it's
But they probably will not be happy to hear that we're gonna require the same restrictions on the overlay in their town as we do in our town.
No, I mean, the reps they're not gonna be displeased with that.
They are?
No, I'm just thinking developers and people that wanna push, new houses and new developments in those areas. They're the ones gonna be upset, not those commissioners. I mean,
Yeah, so how does that affect the part of it, so you wanna go to Turner, and so we're gonna change, it in the overlay, we're gonna make these changes in the ordinances, the rules or whatever? Do Turner have to vote for that? The town council have to vote for those ordinances? And if they don't, then we can throw our weight around and say, no, we're gonna make that happen?
So when you would throw your weight around is when the code enforcement officer or the planning board in Turner permits a new development within the level 4 protection area, and they don't abide by the setback requirements or the septic design requirements that you've established for that level.
Okay, so they would have to know the rules have changed, we don't have to go to them.
They would have to know the rules would change. Maybe they don't change their local rules, okay? I mean, ideally, you would like to see them do what the city of Auburn did with the overlay district.
Right.
Adopt it word for word, whatever rules you put in place. But if they don't, that in itself isn't a problem. But it becomes a problem when they issue a permit for development without consideration
So
of
then if
the
you
USC
have-
desist.
And who,
Then we exercise the ability to go to court, which is.
and who's to say the rules that might be applied to Turner and that would be the same as Lake Auburn?
Right.
You would have a separate, presumably a totally separate set of rules that are tailored for their area, not just say, if it's good enough for Auburn, you're stuck with it in turn.
You've got.
Exactly, based on modern science, like low-impact development and all these things that you can do these days with science. Require the development to adhere to those things, to be very reasonable.
I think you do have to be deliberate about it, and you've got to gather your information.
That's a good point. We looked at, in the modern day, instead of taking 1973 rules.
Septic systems
Putting
are a
it
lot
back
different
over.
now. than
We
they
just
were back
replaced,
then.
yeah,
Digging a
I just
hole
in my
in the
camp replaced a 1973 septic system that was around. And we put in one of those Enviro
Yeah, that's
new
what I
ones
have.
that's,
Yeah.
thing is,
That is in an area that is ripe for amendment in your particular zoning ordinance that this organization adopted in 1973. And I think it falls within your legislative authority. You just say, whereas septic design has improved significantly, and you cite to the science as to why this doesn't impact the purity of the waters of Lake Auburn, assuming it's out there and what you're saying is correct. And then you could make the change for the septic design requirements based on what's actually happening on the ground today.
And there'll be engineers that tell us we can't make that change to naturally occurring unless we require the home to be built with low-impact development standards. Because we're stopping the septic systems to prevent the house from being built. But if we allow the septic systems, the houses get built, and then we have pollution by humans because of improper design, and just inherently we are filthy creatures. Oil, chemicals, fertilizers. So these are all things that this committee is
We'll have
going to
look
need.
at, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the next step, is getting the committee going again, and I think we're already down to what? Review the bylaws for protection of Lake Auburn's next steps, is that what we've been talking about?
that's the next item on the agenda. Right, so, well, it's two, we're not there yet, right. We've got a couple more spots until we get to that
But I think
agenda
that, I
item,
mean,
so.
yeah.
So, with that, in the essence of time, is everybody good with
I
this?
think you clarified, I think.
Yeah,
thank you.
I certainly, it's
How
been a
things
huge
work.
help to me in understanding, thank
So
you.
this body does have the strength with bylaws, and then it goes to the commission. and
Absolutely.
They
Let-
can, yeah.
Let me take the analogy of the federal agency or the state agency a little bit further. Add to it the US Constitution. Congress cannot make a law that is in violation of the US Constitution. Everybody kind of knows that, right? It's intuitive at this point. And a state agency can't make a regulation that exceeds its authority granted to it by Congress. You should think of the charter as being our Constitution. Okay? That came from our founder, the state legislature in 1923 that created this organization, this quasi-municipal organization. So the charter is our Constitution. This body here is the Congress. LawPEC is the federal agency that carries out the purpose of the laws that you guys create.
Now, is there, I don't know if I have a copy of all these rules, like you got from this, where you quoted the sailboats thing, the different.
It's all attached. There's 48 pages in total that you should
Because
have.
I don't remember reviewing their interpretation, so they made this rule based on their interpretation.
That's in their, that's in their use rules, which is a one-pager. It's not very elaborate.
Okay.
There's nothing fancy about it. But it really does look at the level 2, what you guys have established for level 2 protection,
Yep.
and it puts some teeth to it. And that issue right there with the block quote is just a good example.
Okay, good, so we read those things.
Yep,
Sometimes somebody can say something that,
all right, so,
good,
does anyone have any other questions for Jim?
appreciate you.
Thank you.
That's good.
Let's have Jim punch out.
All right, guys. Get that down to the 10th of an hour.
Enjoy.
Yeah, 10th of a minute, good, all right, hurry up, Jim, get up.
Thank you, Jim.
You have to use Lake Shore Drive to get home today.
That's right, yeah.
Jim, this was.
Enjoy the view.
This was very
Don't
good.
go down
Thank you.
Hotel Room.
Yes,
Don't go down
thank you,
hotel
Jim,
room.
thank
Enjoy
you
the
for
view.
everything, it was really.
Thank you for
very,
the
very
opportunity
helpful.
to represent the district. It's
Yes.
really, it's a pleasure of mine. Better than evicting people.
Here we go.
And Sid, I want to thank you as well for facilitating this and getting all this done. This was a big help for, I certainly speaking for me, this was a big help, so.
Good, good. Glad it was helpful.
Okay, so that moves us to the next item. Quickly, you want to just give us an update on the RFP for legal services?
Yes, we put that out to bid, as you know. There were 5 selected.
You good, Jim?
What's that?
There we go.
Oh, it's locked out. There
Wait,
were 5
he's just
law
rounding
firms that
up.
this RFP was sent to. We got back one response, and in accordance with the bid, it was to be open here at our trustee meeting, so there it is. We want to open it, that's the only one we got. We got a couple of responses from others that they were not going to be responding once they had a conflict of interest, so this is the only one we got. This is from Drummond and Woods.
Drummond and Woods. All right.
How do we know that's the name?
They've done stuff.
They've done stuff for us.
They're in Portland.
Didn't they do, did they do? No, I'm thinking.
So,
Do we have to evaluate it?
Well,
Or is it just, can-
I guess I'll leave this up to you folks, but here it is. I mean, there's a whole package here to go through.
I would,
don't know
I
if
would
you-
suggest, I would throw out as a suggestion that we authorize Sid to sort of, over the next month, take a look at that and give us an evaluation. If any of the trustees would like to take a look at it, that it's available here.
How hard is it to scan something like that? Just send it to us, so
Or
those
can
that
we
are
ask for
interested.
copies?
You could probably reach out to him and ask for a digital copy.
Yeah, I can do that. Or, I can scan and do that.
That would be good.
Just to, I mean, it is an open public bid, so on the summary sheet, the good faith estimate of time required for phase 1, and there was, remember, this was a phased
Yeah.
project. Phase 1 is $25,000 to $40,000 to complete phase 1 of this analysis.
Okay.
And that was to gather all the information and understand which agreements and,
Pretty much what Jim's done.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then phase 2 is the wire of the road, going either the negotiating or litigation, right? Is that how we just talked about it?
So I guess what I can do is I will, if everyone wants I'll get an email copy to everyone of this.
If you could do that, and then let's put an agenda item to do an evaluation of this at the next meeting.
Okay?
Do they talk about a time frame in there at all, as far as?
Let's-
I'd be jumping around all
Let's
over the
do
place.
this, let's move this to the next meeting, and we can start, everyone can evaluate, let's have an agenda item. So I'm gonna move on from this agenda
I
item.
would say if the electronic copies are available and that include everything, I prefer that over scanned copies, to be honest.
Yes, they were gonna try and do an email copy electronically if possible. Thank you. All right, next item. Assignment of LawPAC trustee representative. Quick overview on that?
Waiver,
What?
filtration waiver.
Oh, I'm sorry, memo.
Yep, there's a memo.
Sorry.
Yep, it was also, it's in your packet. It's right, I think it's right after the consumer confidence report, if I remember correctly. Yes. There was a request asking
By me,
about,
I think.
yes, asking about our filtration waiver, who granted the waiver, and what would trigger the loss of the waiver. So quite simply, back in 1991, we did apply to the Maine Department of Human Services Drinking Water Program for a waiver to the filtration requirement, so that was granted by the Department of Human Services. What would trigger the loss of the waiver? There are a number of things right in the order. If our turbidity spikes to a 5 NTU, that would be a violation of the waiver. The other thing that specifically mentioned in the approval was a violation of the fecal coliform rule. Just digging into that a little more, what that means is an exceedance over 20 colonies. If you have 10%, we sample the lake every day for fecal coliform. If we have 10% of the samples, which is basically 18 days within a 6-month period, that would be a violation of our waiver as well. Also tied, it's kind of multi-layered, also tied to this filtration waiver, if you read the approval, it referenced our application, and our application had a number of things in there as well.
What is CT?
Contact time of chlorine with the water.
Turner Street
Yeah,
corner.
I never saw it actually explained in there.
So a lot of things that are included, and I've got a copy of that in your packet as well. The application that we actually put in, there were a number of things in there that we said we do, and so the approval letter referenced the application. So they required us to have an intercity agreement on watershed control, land purchase program, new bylaws for the protection of Lake Auburn. So we've done all these things. A new deep water intake, that's something we did at the time so we could get our waiver. Facilities for CT compliance, redundancy criteria for maintaining chlorine. So there's I felt that I needed to include this application, and
Yes,
you might have
thank
seen
you.
it before, but that outlines everything that's tied back to the waiver.
Thank you.
If there was any
And what,
questions.
it's a matter of subjectiveness going forward. What can cause the turbidity to go to that level, or the fecal chloroform?
Fecal coliform.
Those two seem to be key in terms of a scientific standpoint.
Yep.
So what can cause that to rise and become unacceptable? There's probably a long list of things. Some of
Well,
which is subjective.
like back in 2005, we were getting rising coliform hits,
Yeah,
and that was what prompted the gull management program to go into place.
and that's what was causing it, and we got the wrong
Right.
to say that. So the idea of simplistic example, we allow sailboating, that in itself would not cause us to lose a waiver unless one of these two numbers started going up, and then we could presume that allowing sailboating caused that.
Just as an example.
As an example, I'm saying maybe that's
But,
overly
but there's,
simplistic.
well, that is overly simplifying it, because if you go by what I've got in this document, in the application for the waiver, on page 7-3, it says no body contact recreation.
Some of the existing controls of water quality are included.
Yeah, page 7-3, recreational restrictions including no body contact, or ice fishing, no trespassing at the, I mean, there are a lot of things that are included that tied into keeping our waiver. So those things specifically. An adoption of bylaws for the protection of Lake Auburn, that was part of it, and that's,
Okay, great. Again, great stuff, thank you.
So
Very helpful.
you're the opinion that this here, if they found out we did something contrary to this, they would just yank our waiver regardless of the numbers?
they'd have the right to do it, yes.
They would.
So what happens if we do violate this and they yank the waiver?
18 months.
18 months.
But
If you have to build a plant.
if we're working towards building the plant, then I think we talked about that in another trustee meeting, then they allow us to extend that deadline. So as long as we're
Or do
working
they
for
give you
financing,
a time
engineering.
to correct it, or?
Well, yes, I mean, if, I think it would be viewed much differently if you did something voluntarily to violate your own ordinance. But if things happen to you, like the Gulf Management Program, for instance, our coliform hits were rising, we discovered what it was, we addressed it, took care of it, and so we kept our waiver. So,
But
Right.
at the time, the EPA was saying, build a filtration plant. They said, you violate it, start building it. And we had to have legal arguments about how we can correct it, and to get them to say, it's okay, you figured it out, you can correct it. But
As opposed to if we had started
down in Massachusetts was, that's the lake in western Mass.
Auburn Reservoir.
They had the same issue, and they fought the EPA to say, no, we don't have to filter our water for Boston because we can control it. And we were in the same boat and got the same relief from the EPA.
Whereas if the Auburn windsurfing team, we start on Lake Auburn.
And they
Take
said,
a crap.
That's
What's the matter with
stubbing
you?
our nose.
What's
at
the matter
this.
with you?
Sail out the
Right,
crap.
right, okay, that would be a
We
voluntary.
decided
come
we
down
want to start
heavy-handed.
filtration process.
Intake buoys was the downwind.
So they would be, they're the ones that would be causing that necessarily.
Okay,
So-
good. Anybody else have any questions on that? Or can we move on to the next agenda item?
Just that, you guys did get that email that Evan Sear had sent us, the trustees, requesting the two individuals at the state water program to, verify what can and will cause our waiver. Because the documents that we're looking at are 30 years old now.
Yeah.
So that's, the commission is working on that as well,
Okay, good.
Yeah.
From the commission standpoint.
through the clerk to get clarification of the state, the drinking water program.
Yeah, because the idea was, if we allowed swimming in Lake Auburn, we'd immediately lose our waiver.
Right.
Because based on this, no human contact with the lake, therefore we lose our waiver. So you want confirmation that that would in fact happen.
Right, in that Evan Sears is
Yeah.
spearheading that. He's an Auburn rep.
Yes. Okay. Not that anyone suggested swimming in the lake.
No,
There's been
No, just some
policy.
study,
It's just, it was,
Right.
it's not even a suggestion, it
Yeah.
was someone's opinion.
and that's gonna come out
A
August
study we
16th.
haven't seen.
Yeah.
Nobody in the city has suggested it. Okay. No, there's no policy been put forward to suggest swimming. So we've got a assignment of the Law Pack trustee.
Yep, I put that in there as an agenda item. Each, we have, as you know, we have 3 reps to the commission. 2 are at large. 1 is a Auburn Water District trustee, and they're staggered so that each year we only assign 1 commissioner to that board. So this year, our assignment of our trustee rep has come up. Dan is our current rep.
About a year and a half now, plus or minus.
And he took over when
Tiz.
when Tiz left, he took over her term.
Okay.
So that's come up now. So it's usually,
And in the past, Sid, you said they've done nominations and then we vote for it, that person.
yep, it's been a little, it seems to change every time. Sometimes it's just who wants to do it, and someone raises their hand and everyone agrees, but the last time we did this for at large, there were, we took nominations, there were interviews done, so I guess it's up, I leave it up to the.
So we're,
trustees how to
trust,
do
there's,
that.
this, the trustee one is up
We
right
can
now.
do that for trustees, we did that for the.
For the
Yeah,
at-large.
So trustees, there's a trustee position that is available now. Dan is currently the trustee. Dan, would you like to stay the
Yeah, we'd like
member?
to do that, and next
Okay.
meeting, September something.
Is there
so-
any other trustees that would like to be on Law Pack?
See, no.
Does any, okay, do we need to vote on, do you
So
guys
that's
feel
the
the
main
motion?
trustee, that's, we don't have to go through the same, we were talking about one that
If
was
somebody
outside of
else
the
would like to
trustee.
do it, I mean, let's put it out there, we'll vote, I mean, that's
Yeah,
good, I'm good with that, then,
I make a motion that we,
reappoint,
reappoint Dan Billett.
do we have a second on that?
I'll second that.
Okay, so do we have discussion on that? All in favor?
I'll recuse.
All opposed, and Dan recused himself, so 6-0 vote to reinstate Dan Bilodeau as the,
I think that when we have somebody on the outside,
Yes, I
that's when
think
we
that's-
ask for the nominations and we have the interviews and somebody.
everyone gets a fair,
With the trustees, I think everybody should have a shot if they want to be on it,
Yeah.
and then we can vote, but.
Casey and I come up trustees next year, so if I'm done as a trustee, then you'll be doing this exact same thing when that happens,
Yeah.
whoever comes in, or, so one of you guys might be definitely interested in getting involved with that, so, and you're
Okay.
more than welcome to join the meetings,
I go to most.
I think,
yeah, you go
Jason,
anyway.
you asked for the
Okay.
agenda packet?
Yeah, I also had kind of some procedural quick questions about that law, the law pack in general. Do we don't get as a board the agendas? Or, I mean, I
I
assume
do.
they're
I do.
posted, but you
I
get,
do.
so there's
I
a
do.
voluntary list? Is that what the issue is? Shouldn't we automatically, as a board, overseeing that group?
Why don't we,
If you want to be included, I can include you.
Yeah,
yeah,
just
why don't
request-
you
I would
opt in, if you'd like, send Sid an email requesting to be on the email list.
Yep, there's a whole bunch of public people on the
Yep.
email list, so you just add your name to it and you'll get it.
So is that good? Any trustees would like to be on it, send an email to Sid and he'll put you on the email list. Fair?
And that's publicly posted?
Yep.
And members of the public just generally can get on that in the same way?
Well, it's
Or is that
usually
like a
anyone that's,
secret?
anyone
Because
that's,
not-
it's not a secret, anyone that requests to be on the list is on the list.
How hard would it be to just put with the agendas that are posted that if you want to be added to the list, then you can be added? Just to make a, I mean, we're making a statement in a public meeting, that's fine, I'm sure, fine and dandy. Does it say on there, there's a way to add
It's on the
yourself to the
website,
list on the site?
It's on the website.
Probably not.
Every meeting does have open session as well.
Is the agenda posted on the website?
On the Watershed Commission website.
So the agenda is posted on the
Just like
Watershed
ours
Commission website. So anybody that wants to get it can go on the Watershed Commission website and download it.
But if you want me to put you on the email list, I'll do that too.
Yeah.
So any trustee that would like to be on the list, send an email.
Yeah, send me an email.
Okay, great. So now we're moved to the review of the bylaws for the protection. I think we're gonna say we're.
August 16th is the meeting, we should table this future agenda item specifically to the next meeting after August 16th, because that's when the city will have
Yeah.
the actual report out.
We're
Or
gonna
you guys,
motion the table?
well, I don't know, do you guys want to do that, or do you want to actually get together, start working on
Casey?
Turner, Minot, Hebron, Buckfield?
This is the bylaws that the Lake Water Protection operates under. If we're gonna review those bylaws,
No.
Yeah.
Yes, review, yes, that's what it is.
Hold it.
if we're reviewing their
Protection of
bylaws.
Lake Auburn.
Bylaws for protection of Lake
Yeah.
Auburn, not the protection, okay, fine.
Right. This is for the Auburn Water District bylaws for the protection of Lake Auburn.
Right.
This is their governing document.
Should we be asking them for comment?
For the
At our
law.
at our last commission meeting, that specifically came up. So I believe the commission does want to weigh in on this process. If you read my minutes, I've made a recommendation in here. I recommend that we engage legal services to provide us with a template or outline for the review to make sure we follow an orderly process from start to finish for review. It'll be important to include items such as review schedule, review team composition, public and regulatory and legal review should all be worked into this. So I think it's important, this really hasn't been, the last time these bylaws were reviewed, it says to do it every 5 years. I think the last time that was done was 15 years ago, and there was some effort put into it. There was some drafts that were generated, but in the final analysis, they decided to keep it just like it is, because the more they defined it, the more complicated and difficult it got, so they decided to keep them as they were. So this review we're going through right here really is probably the first time that if there's going to be a serious effort into reviewing these bylaws, I feel very strongly there should be a process, a documented process from start to finish. Because I think there's a lot of ways that we can really trip ourselves going through this if we're just going to start.
So you're
changing
suggesting that we
bylaws.
have our attorney Cross put together a formal process that we can then, once we look at the process, we could accept it as trustees if we wanted to, or we could reject it. Is that what-
Exactly.
Did we not seek legal counsel the last time we began? I'm
Yeah, we were
fairly
actually
certain
getting
we
started.
did seek legal counsel, and or we at least asked for guidance, and it may have been that was what stopped the direction, because just to go back a step, we had pointed this out in a prior 3 years ago, that it needed to be reviewed. It was in the bylaws that this needed to be reviewed by us, and not necessarily changed, but a review process needed to happen.
Right.
And we started that sort of informally, and then it wasn't informal. The board voted on it. It set us in this direction to review it, and then I think we came back. There were some questions that we brought to legal counsel, and that was a point maybe in transition where we decided to put it off, and now we're just coming back to it. So I just want to clarify it. Almost, I don't want to get you off track, but you were saying that we haven't reviewed it.
Well, there's never been a formal start to finish review process that's been completed. And I think that it's sort of new territory now to be diving into these without a real plan.
Well, I think
So
the
what
plan
I-
should include those specifics on what we need to protect ourselves and the committee,
Yeah.
and make sure that the bylaws are legal and that there's no issues with it. So that's cause about public notice on meetings, make sure meetings are available if the public wants to be involved, that kind of thing. So it's gonna be,
There's a lot,
And I would
it's
ask
going to
you-
be quite
I
a
hope he's
process
asked
to go through
already,
these in an
because
orderly fashion.
I think it's a question for Jim, because he could probably look and have a record of that correspondence. I'm very certain that we spoke with him about it, and I don't know to what level, if it was a,
What did he provide with at that time?
it was, it was it was a discussion that we bounced off him similar, or it was around the time that we had that initial presentation
And so.
as well, about
basically-
the bylaw, about where the bylaws fit into the whole structure. He gave us the PowerPoint right around that time, so it was part of, it was all around surrounding that discussion.
So,
I'd just like to ask him.
so it can, to summarize, Sid, you're gonna reach out to Jim to put together a formal process. If he's already, ask him if he's already got something in place, then we've already done this, if he can provide that info. And then guide us on the process for this. I think that makes perfect sense. We gotta have a formal
I
process.
want to make sure we do.
It's been 30 years, right?
Yeah.
Or longer?
But you can't go line by line and say, let's just take that word out and add this one.
Right,
You've
no, we gotta have a real process.
Well, when we first talked about it, and we did this as a board, we had this discussion as a board. We first talked about it, and the discussion was that we had two steps, one to review, and then after the review that's required by the document, we would talk about what the next steps, where we would have to go afterwards. So there's a review piece, and then a potential next steps. That's, I don't wanna say we're reinventing the wheel here, but we do wanna ask Jim.
Yeah,
And that's,
well, that's what I'm saying.
I agree with
Then, if we know what it is, then let's,
yeah.
but if we don't,
And we
we
should
don't
keep
know what
our eye
it
on the end goal, that we want a formal vote that says we have reviewed this document. Like that's,
is. Yeah, that's what I think
What
what
it's-
Sid
yeah.
is suggesting.
Right.
Does anyone have any objection to that?
No.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sid.
Okay, I'll work on it.
That gets us to old business. Bonding for capital improvements. We want to do a workshop.
Yeah, we've had 2 or 3 meetings, Tanya, I, and Andy, and Mike, you had been a couple,
Yeah,
yeah, a couple of those two, sure. And we've discussed the possibility of a number of different scenarios for how we fund our capital investments moving forward. So I think at this point, this is not something that you can just talk about for 10 minutes and decide to move forward. I think this is gonna take some focused attention and effort to really decide how we want this department to run in the future. Do we fund capital out of cash on hand? Do we bond? Do we do a combination of the both? And I think it's gonna take a
It's
workshop.
going to take a workshop.
I understand, and to be honest, what Tanya's put together is very good. It talks about scenarios, and it's easy to understand. We just had to tweak a couple of things, but I hope we can get together one more time before the workshop. But it'll definitely show.
When do you suggest we do the workshop? Based on
Where
where we're at
that one
today?
change, we can be very soon. Because the only change I had was making sure that, what I want to do was make sure everything is equal. Doesn't matter what the number is. Here's a number for this scenario, here's a number for this scenario, here's a number for that scenario. As long as
Yeah.
we're using the exact same numbers, it's
Criteria,
irrelevant
right,
to what the
right,
numbers
right.
are.
Same
It's
criteria.
just looking at what each does
Mhm.
affects our cash flow, affects our costs,
So,
and affects our
do we
pipe
need to, do we want to throw out some dates and then have a vote on the date for the workshop? So.
I think we could be ready anytime
Absolutely.
anytime.
Yeah.
So we've got, I'm gonna say, when's the next meeting? Is the 18th?
Next meeting is when,
Yes.
is the 18th?
August 18th.
August
So
18th.
that week of August 9th
Yeah.
through the 13th, that week looks fair to me. I have a couple of things going on in August, the first week in August.
I mean, you wanna do the 11th? It was a Wednesday, the 11th? Does anybody have a?
If you could do the 12th, I could actually attend. I get
The
back
12th?
from India.
The 12th, Wednesday the
morning.
12th, August the 12th.
It's an
I
afternoon.
haven't got a problem with that.
We all have
I'm not-
training
I'm not
that
able to
day.
be there.
Are you not able to be there?
I got my first granddaughter showing up in a few days.
Oh, nice,
And,
congratulations.
From the 7th till probably the 14th, I'm gonna be down in DC.
Okay,
I don't need to be in this meeting.
okay. If you're,
I've been through the bonding stuff and all that, you know, more often than anybody except Sid. So, have the
But it's
meeting
only a
without me.
workshop.
well, I definitely
Yeah.
argue for your, to accommodation to allow you to attend remotely if you feel the need.
Oh, right, yeah, that's right.
Well, if that was, I could do that.
Yeah, that would work for me too. If you did
Well,
it.
if it's a workshop, well, let's do the 12th.
I mean, I'm open on the 12th right now.
We all have training on the 12th.
Okay.
We're gonna be
How about the
gone.
10th?
You
That
can't
seems
do
good.
Water
the 12th?
utility.
No, 12th is out now.
10th works in the afternoon if we can add that Zoom thing, or even if I'm FaceTiming, but you know, like KC, I mean, I trust that you guys are good with the bonding stuff.
Yeah. The 10th is okay. 10th
So we
okay with
have two
everybody else?
that can't be here unless you're gonna do it. via
Well,
Zoom.
if they're all right with us getting together, it's not gonna be in adopting any policy.
Oh, no, this is just a
Right.
review
It's-
of.
it's
what-
a review of what's
I can
in-
listen on my phone in the crew van on the way to the hotel, so I mean, it's like, so if there's some sort of available, if
If we
there's
can
an
pull,
email
someone
link.
can pull up their computer and we can zoom in or whatever.
Yeah, or a call, but
Yeah.
Okay, what
Yeah,
time?
FaceTime.
4 o'clock?
You wanna do 4 o'clock on the 10th?
10th, perfect.
Bonding workshop.
Spell correct, bondage, whatever.
X out.
Okay. All right, and now we're on to AV equipment to host trustee meetings.
Yes, in your packet, there is some information. The last time we met, we were waiting until the state of emergency had been lifted. It has happened, and there was some legislation pending at the time to allow remote meetings to happen moving forward on a permanent basis. Lo and behold, that did pass. So now, in order to hold remote meetings after the old law expires, you do need to, well, the requirement is to have a remote meeting policy, and MMA has an example of that, which I put in your packets. It's the next to last thing in your packet here. And if you remember back along, we were looking at the AV equipment we would need in order to allow remote participation like this policy calls for. And we did some research, and that was going to be in the neighborhood of $3,500 to get the camera, the audio equipment, and some way to project that. So I guess at this time, I don't know if people want to move forward with a remote participation policy or not have hybrid meetings. I guess that's kind of where we are, so.
I know the airport board is doing it, they're pushing it forward. There's a lot of boards and committees that are doing it.
I would say absolutely we
And
want a policy, but.
I'm in
sorry,
favor of
Tom.
doing it.
But
I'm-
where does it say in this that you?
The option?
You have
Yeah,
to
I'm
invest
against.
$3,000 to,
Well, that,
I
that,
understand
that
that
was
was your
based
goal,
upon
but where
our,
does it say
no,
you
it
have
doesn't
to?
say you have to spend
Okay.
$3,500.
because
But
I'm
that was
okay
our-
with making it inconvenient. I mean, we want to encourage people to attend in person. However, not saying inconvenient, that's a bad, came out wrong. But to actually have an option for someone who cannot otherwise attend, to make it as convenient as we can within our budget. I think that's
No.
If someone
reasonable.
gets sick.
And if someone's sick, you don't want, right.
You don't
I'm
want them
against
here.
it myself, because I've watched the public meetings since the pandemic, and I think it's been a huge disadvantage having remote anything.
And there are two pieces, the
Anybody
public part
who is remote,
and
then-
our part.
Yeah.
So that's
It's a
two
can,
separate.
it's a can of worms.
I think the
Pandora's
person that's
box.
on remote has a disadvantage over the people that are in the room.
Definitely.
I think there's just no real advantage to making a policy about it. Now, whether we get the equipment so that somebody can dial in, because we are recording anyway, so maybe that kind of goes in with the recording part of it as well as it being available to somebody who wants to dial in.
There's no, yeah.
But I don't think we should have a policy, nor should we encourage remote meetings. I think this
So,
is proven pretty much from
Casey's-
education that this kind of thing.
So, there's no, we don't have a motion. So this is just we need a motion if we're going to do anything. If we're not gonna do anything, then it's an
It
agenda.
doesn't
item.
sound like we'll have a consensus then. What
I mean,
what
it's
does
something we
Bob
should
and Kevin
consider.
think?
I would ask for an agenda item. If I have to make a motion for it, I will, but we've been talking about it off and on.
It's an agenda item right now. If you'd like to have,
That's
then make a motion.
Well, I mean, absolutely, I would make a motion. I'd
And
like to
I'll
have a policy.
Yeah, and
I
I'll
mean,
see,
Go
it's
ahead, then
not-
make
it
a
doesn't
motion.
necessarily mean what we're gonna, what specifically we're gonna have. But I would definitely like to make the motion that we, as a board, adopt a remote meeting policy.
I'll second that.
Second, okay, discussion
No, that-
now.
Oh, I was gonna say, that should be tied to the expenditure to get the equipment we need to do it.
Right, that
Well, it's one of the-
discussion,
which
that
is one of the options in the
does not
discussion
include
for it.
spending any money.
Well, there's no way-
On
Policy
equipment.
doesn't. Of
Because
course
we,
not.
that's just a quote, because we haven't decided how
Right,
we're
but
going
the-
to do it or what the policy is.
Right, but agreeing on a policy does not agree to any spending of money.
Absolutely.
Correct.
Absolutely not.
We can't agree on a policy unless we have one in front of us. Right now, we have an outline of a policy.
Right, that's what,
So-
your motion was what?
Well, the motion is that we, as a board, explore a policy. I don't know how we do
Okay.
that.
So
So
that's
that's
a
my
friendly, he's amended that we explore
Well,
developing,
I mean, that's
that we
what,
develop a policy?
So it would be at a further
Yep.
date.
I'm not,
Let's take a
yeah,
vote.
I'm not saying to develop a policy right now. I wasn't.
Yeah, no,
that
I
wasn't
know,
my
but-
original motion.
Right,
Just, my motion is just that we, as a board, explore a policy to hold remote, to. hold
Dan
remote
seconded it.
meetings.
so, the discussion is so the motion is that you are motioning that we explore developing a policy for remote meetings. Is that correct?
Yes.
And Dan seconded, so the discussion is on the table. Is there any discussion on that?
My personal feeling is I would not be in favor of remote meetings going forward unless there was an emergency. So therefore, I don't see the reason to have a policy in my own mind, because we spend time and money and energy doing something that I would vote against doing in the first place.
Is there a policy now saying, like, I know you might be away and we might be discussing something that you want to vote on. Is there any reason why you can't call in and we can have them
There is,
FaceTime?
yes, there is,
or
under the
there is?
legislation, you can't, after the term expires, you can't have a public meeting, I mean, a remote meeting, unless you adopt a policy, a remote meeting policy. That's in the law.
So technically, you're right, that would make sense if Dan was away and said, well, can you put the phone over here and he can listen in? Technically, that would not,
You
he
can't do
couldn't
that.
vote
You couldn't
personally.
do that.
He might be able to listen.
After July 30th.
You can listen, but you cannot vote.
But he
So
can
we could
listen,
adopt
but
a
he can't
policy
vote.
that's-
So he
that's
could
saying
listen to
that
the
you
meeting and
could,
hear what's going on, but he couldn't have any input and he couldn't vote.
because he's not physically here.
Right.
When does that expire?
I think it's July 30th.
So is that something we can change?
Change what?
Or,
That's the policy.
That's what he's
Right.
asking.
Right.
That's what this
State
law says.
why- That, I think if I'm hearing you right, that's the state law that would have previously allowed us to do that. Now it's ended.
That was against
Where it
the law.
expires July
The
30. If you want to meet remotely after July 30, you have to adopt
Have
a
a
policy.
Is LawPEC doing that?
We only meet.
So,
sometimes.
again,
We're not meeting till September.
it's almost 6 o'clock.
That they re-
It's
remote?
almost 6 o'clock. We're talking about the trustees. Do we want to explore, there's a motion on the floor, discussions about this pod. Andy has said he's not interested, Casey's not interested, I'm not interested, Bob's not interested.
just, I don't know. Is that the vote? You want to take?
No, well, I'm just,
We have-
We might as well take a vote on it.
all
Yeah, I
right,
mean,
let's,
discussion's over.
discussion's over.
Take a vote.
All in favor of developing a remote use policy? 3, all opposed? 4. It's a negatory. Okay. Trustee open session.
I just had one item real quick. I know that a while back, several months ago, we were talking about the cell tower, and I thought you were
Yes,
gonna do
I
some
know that-
research
that's
and
been on-
information about
Yeah.
whether
What
we
have
should take a
until
deal or
20
not take a deal.
2023?
We need to, yeah, I'm glad, actually glad you brought that up. We do owe American Tower a response, and Kevin and I, that's just fallen off my radar. I got no great excuse.
So can you guys give us an update? Can we put that up, Sid, will you put that on
Next
the
agenda.
agenda for, on the next thing? And let's have it, you guys give us an update or whatever we need
I
to
just
do.
want to know that.
Yep, thank you, Andrew, yep. Any
So
other?
we'll probably want to be, are we going to plan on some kind of action or no action next month?
they're gonna give us a report, and then we can determine what we wanna do. at
Yeah,
that
we were gonna
point.
find out whether it makes sense for us to
Whether-
take the deal or some version of it, or just
Right,
keep.
you
status
guys,
quo.
how about the agenda to advise us as trustees
Did you
on
remember
what
the-
direction we should take?
Deal or no deal?
Because you remember, if we took, if we kept it the way it was, and they decided, okay, we're going bankrupt, or we're gonna, whatever, we'd lose everything. So do we make a deal to help them?
Deal, no
financially?
deal, or you
Right,
need
yeah.
to do more, deal, no deal, or you need more, you need to do more work.
Right.
If it's, you're not ready to make a
That's what
decision.
we need to know.
Okay, Sid, we will definitely get together.
If you don't have an answer yet, that's okay, then that's the thing, and we'll put the agenda on put it on the next agenda, okay?
I got one thing.
Yeah.
There was a, from the groundwell study that Sid, you sent over to me, there was, at the end of it, there was some recommendations, and the next steps, and I don't think if it was budgeted 60,000, or if it was an estimate to budget for 60,000, but I think it would be irresponsible for us not to follow up. That we have close to 2 million gallons a day that we can extract from ground wells if the shit hits the fan for us, which would take us off the waiver basically, because it's groundwater, it's not surface water rules. So we can run that through our facility and provide good water, you know, at least through our intake pipe if we pursue something like this. So all I'm asking for is a future agenda item for him to bring us up to date, for him to send that study to you guys, and maybe appropriating come budget season that kind of capital, it might be 70 or 80 grand, to follow up with those recommendations for our ground wells.
So Sid, do you know what he's talking about? And,
Yep, I do.
Can you throw that on the agenda?
I just do want to say though, you know, this was back in 2015, and this board, there was a lot of new faces here now, but it was quite a comprehensive groundwater study. It was decided not to move forward with any more work concerning that, because there just was not enough groundwater to warrant moving ahead with it. I mean, that was the recommendation at
Yeah.
the time.
You
So
wanted
that's been
4
fully
million.
vetted.
But it was 2 million gallons a day, and it would be enough to take care of Auburn's needs in the interim if we ever
If
have a
there's an
shut.
emergency.
Yes.
Just-
And you're talking about $600,000.
We pump
of cost.
2.4 million a day right now.
Right. So if there's a fire or something like that, obviously there's gonna be a lot of circumstances, but we pretty much can keep our reservoirs full.
Well, we're 400,000 gallons a day shy, of keeping them full.
And
There
so,
was impurities in that water too,
There's a
wasn't
lot
there?
of iron.
They found there was too many clay lenses when they were hoping to find a good gravel deposit, but they kept drilling through layers of clay.
and that's
That
why
was-
they
that
wanted
was the
follow-up
issue.
work
Yep.
to be done. I'm just saying, I think it's something the trustees should be looking at.
I can bring the study back up
Could
again.
you bring the study back
Sure.
and evaluate, because I think if we're not, an emergency standpoint, something, you and I had a private conversation once, that just the things that keep you up at night, an emergency. We should have an emergency
Backup plan?
backup plan.
And that's the reason why we did the study.
Yeah, so let's see, I'd be in favor of addressing a backup plan in case of an emergency.
Might sleep better.
He's gonna sleep better one of these days. All right.
No comment.
Any other trustees? Thank you, Dan. Anybody else have anything? And that makes us a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.